All right, guys, we are live, and with me today are four of Iowa's leading governor candidates. I'm not going to introduce them. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. You guys share a minute or two, your name, your background, maybe why you're running as well. We're going to start with the candidates that are with us live. We also have two that are joining us on the online side of things, and we're happy to have all of you here today. So, Brad, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, well, happy to start. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Brad Sherman, and I'm running for governor to be the next governor of the state of Iowa. I grew up doing heavy equipment work, operating heavy equipment, dozers, drag lines, digging ditches, draining wetland to make farmland out of it. So I always like to make the point that I have swamp draining experience.
That's awesome.
So that's something that I think is important when it comes to politics. But I moved to Iowa City. My wife and I moved to Iowa City in 1981. And we moved there. I had finished ministry training, and we moved there in 1981 to start a church in Iowa City. And I've been a pastor there for 45 years. And so that's been obviously the primary vocation I've done during that time. But we saw socialism, Marxism, and a lot of indoctrination taking place here. So that's what really launched me into being involved politically. And during those 45 years, we've done several things. I've got a broad range of experience. You know, home building, real estate development. We helped start, and I was a board chair and president of Informed Choice Medical Clinic, which was a pro-life organization for 10 years, and been involved, county chair, been involved from the grassroots level all the way to the national convention in local politics as well. Ran for the state legislature in 22, and we had a daughter that passed away in the middle of our term. I probably would have run again for state house, except that we made plans to move to be part to a different district to be close to our grandkids. And so, long story short, in that process, God started speaking to our hearts about doing this. We prayed about it. He confirmed it so strongly that we had absolutely no doubt about the direction we're taking here. So we jumped in early, the first person to jump into this race, even before Governor Reynolds said she wasn't going to run again. And so I called her and told her that, and I think that's an important step. I felt like that was the right thing to do, just to be straight up. And so did that, and then we made our announcement in February of this year. And so far we've been to 218 events, I think, and 80 counties. And so we're very encouraged, a lot of grassroots support. And so that's what we're doing. We're running to be the next governor of the state of Iowa. So there's more I could tell you, but that's kind of a nutshell.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Eddie, how about you?
I am ecstatic actually to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elijah, and to the team. My name is Eddie Andrews, and I am a 3-term state representative. Many of my colleagues refer to me as the hardest working man in the Iowa House. I've been getting a lot of things done for the state of Iowa, fighting regulations, fighting for parents' rights, fighting for fair tax structure. And being invited to this entrepreneur business summit is actually right up my alley, because a lot of times people put us in boxes, right? I'm in ministry as well. Co-pastored a Hispanic congregation for about 13 years, and people put you in that box or a legislative box. But what has paid the bills and what I've been really passionate about for a couple of decades has been entrepreneurship. And I have worked for or contracted with or provided services for many of the same companies that you know, the larger companies, John Deere, Ag Leader, Corteva, Pioneer, Emerson, you name it, Casey's, Ameritrade, providing services for them, either in technology or their SOPs, making sure that they can effectively doge themselves. Also have worked with a number of startups. My own startup, we grew one startup from 0 customers to 1.4 million users before we sold that off. We've had successes, we've had failures, we got back up, and you know, that is truly an entrepreneurial story. And one of the things that I've been working on is actually fighting the regulations that entrepreneurs face, really simplifying a lot of what they can do, and was part of the effort to bring what I refer to as the Shark Tank of Iowa, those two funds that we've created. And I have ideas to expand those to get better bang for the state's buck, to make sure that this Iowa stays and remains a great place for entrepreneurs.
We'll touch on that a little bit later, but thank you for being here and sharing your background.
Love it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, let's do Adam next. And Adam, you can hear us okay?
I can hear you okay.
Awesome.
Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you perfect.
All right, very good. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Adam Steen, also candidate for governor on the Republican side. I've got 18 years in entrepreneurship. I cut my teeth learning investment banking, started my own consulting business, and worked with my father raising capital for companies, primarily in value-added agriculture businesses. I got very, very good at working with businesses, identifying really joint venture and strategic partnership opportunities. And so I spent a lot of time connecting companies with other businesses to create new distribution channels, new sales channels. Worked very well, and ultimately jumped into a product manufacturing company. A buddy of mine invented a turkey decoy, and I took that product out of his garage, wrote a business plan, wrote a private placement memorandum, sourced the capital, sourced the manufacturing, and launched the business. Ultimately hit national distribution in about a year and a half, and sold my ownership in that about 10 years ago. So I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. My wife has invented a product that effectively cures plagiocephaly, which is flathead syndrome in children. And we own the patent on that product right now. And I would be manufacturing that product right now had I not jumped into state government and operated the state for 5 years. And now I'm jumping in to run for governor. So I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I've got grit, I've got tenacity. I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows. And I love entrepreneurs. I love entrepreneurship. And I'm very, very excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. And now we have Julie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Happy to have you here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, what you're running for? Yeah.
Julie Stauch. I'm running for governor. I'm a Democrat. I am a 7th generation Iowan and have a graduate of Iowa State University, have a degree in education. And when I graduated, there were no jobs available for teachers, and consequently in the area where we were living. And so consequently, I opened my own retail business, which I ran for 10 years, and then transitioned into other work and have run 2 other businesses in between, working for different companies and some state government work as well. And so I am really interested overall. I've been running a very different kind of campaign, out actually having open-ended conversations with Iowans about what they want done, what they're concerned about. And so I'm looking forward to hearing a little bit of these questions and looking at how they relate to what I'm hearing from people all over the state. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for attending. As the one Democrat on the panel, that's what I wanted to mention to the audience, and the other 3 are Republicans running for the CEO of the state of Iowa. I mean, that's what a lot of people call it. So why don't we go to you, Julie, since you went last. We'll go to you first. Let's talk about economic growth and taxation. Iowa, depending on the survey, because surveys are always up or down, Iowa ranks high in business climate in some things and very low in other things, right? You might be aware venture capital is low. Sometimes new business growth can be pretty low. Startup growth on other end, some things are very high. Yet many entrepreneurs cite that property taxes and regulatory compliance costs are burdens, right? It's always a burden on the business anytime we're having to spend money on things that aren't going into growth, into employees. What's your take on that? What specific tax or regulatory reforms would you maybe look at? There's a lot of talk about property taxes in particular with this race. It's kind of a national trend. Some people are saying, let's remove property taxes entirely. Others are saying, well, how are we going to pay for necessary needs?
Yeah.
Why don't you handle that?
Well, let me begin right
Yeah.
away by stirring pot here.
Yeah.
So Iowa's tax code right now is a very hot mess. A lot of really poor decisions have been made of late, and we're on a fast track to bankruptcy as a state, folks, if we stay with what we're doing. There are a number of taxes. I'm open to looking at changing property taxes because they are a burden on a lot of people, particularly on people in rural areas who don't necessarily have the income level to sustain the increases in property taxes that are coming at them due to other changes. But I also am looking at the track of, looking at one of the questions that you gave us as a sample to work from was about nearby states. And so I looked up South Dakota because a lot of what has been decided here in Iowa is on track with where South Dakota is. And there are quite a few problems there as well that are actually squelching some of their entrepreneurism. I'm an entrepreneur myself in that I've had 3 different businesses that I've run. And I think it's difficult to talk about taxation specific to entrepreneurship because it depends on what is the product you're selling, who you are, which there's a lot of that goes on now, or is the product you're selling, like Adam described, things that have been invented and that you're going to mass produce and go out and sell. So I think there's a lot to look at here, but I'm just putting my line in the sand that the current tax structure that we're dealing with right now is not a sound structure for the long term.
And
one of the
you're
things
saying
that I saw
specifically, sorry if you don't mind if I cut in, you're saying, so even specifically for entrepreneurs as well, you don't feel like the path that we're currently on with taxation is the right path to be on. So you mentioned Adam's name, so I'm going to give Adam the floor. Not that it was in a bad way. You're saying you're agreeing slightly with what he was saying there. Adam, what are your thoughts on that same question, just regarding, and she brought up a great point, with business, it's not just what I was saying, property taxes, right? We have all sorts of taxes, sales tax, right? We have our taxes on our employees. What is your take on that?
Yeah, fundamentally, I believe that the government taxes far too much. The government exists to punish evil and condone good. And I respectfully disagree with Julie's comment that we're on a fast track to bankruptcy. The Republicans have done a fantastic job of budgeting, creating rainy day funds. We're in good shape, and we should continue to find ways to lower taxes in every single area. And I will say this from a property tax perspective, we need property tax reform, but by and large, we have a spending problem. And what we need to do for not just businesses, not just entrepreneurs, but every single Iowan is look at where we are spending money, look at how we can lower or reduce costs on a systematic statewide basis and continue to lower taxes and remove that burden from Iowans. And again, we need property tax reform. I'm a fan of zero-based budgeting. I know when I ran, call it my turkey fan business, I had a budget. We raised just a little less than $500,000 to not just manufacture the product, but market the product across the country. And I had to know where every single cent of that money went. And I had to know that it went to good use to make sure that we got the product launched and got it out there. That takes proper budgeting, proper controls. We need, from a local level, local control perspective, transparency and accountability from school boards, from city councils, and from county supervisors. And I would be very much in favor of championing zero-based budgeting to create that transparency and create that accountability. We have a spending problem.
Julie, I'm going to go back to Julie for 30 seconds here because her name was mentioned. Then we're going to go back to you two here. Julie, your name was mentioned. 30 seconds. You want to maybe give a reply there on some of the stuff with taxation?
We have 2 different worldviews here. It's a little hard of where to begin.
That's okay.
So I think I'll just leave it at we have 2 different worldviews here. Even the explanation of government is completely contrary to everything that has been written about our governments and the purpose of our government.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll go to Brad here. And same thing. Do you want to add anything on that specific question?
Yeah, I mean, I think minimizing regulation is always a very important thing it has to do, because I believe the people are what create the economy. And the biggest thing that government can do, at least one of the biggest things, is to just get out of the way.
Yeah.
And regulations many times just get in the way. You know, some of the recent numbers I've looked at, I think 24% is an estimate of the cost of a new home is due to government regulations. And so that's a big issue. You know, we have to really look those things over, find out what we need to keep. Some regulations, of course, are necessary, but some aren't. And you know, I've done some home building. I mentioned that. I've done some entrepreneur work as well. And you know, I guess home building and real estate development is sort of like entrepreneur work as well. But you know, invented a couple of products and pushed them into the market. So I have a little bit of understanding of what that's like. And then we get to taxes. You know, taxes really is a big part of it. I mean, I know a guy over in the part of the country, part of the state where I live. He built a driving range for golf driving range, and he told me one day that his monthly tax bill is $40,000 a month. And when I heard it, I thought, "You mean yearly, right?" And he goes, "No, monthly." And so, you know, this is huge. And so this is getting taxes under control. Property tax is important, and it's not just important for the business owner, because business owners always pass along the high cost of taxes to their consumers. And so that's just the fact. Same thing with corporate taxes. You know, I believe in lowering low corporate taxes. We have to have some corporate tax. I believe it doesn't apply across the board, but corporate taxes, who pays the corporate tax? Well, a corporation that's making a product, they just put that into the price of their product, and so the consumers end up paying the tax. And so and then the property tax issue for our personal homes is a whole other issue. I think that can be separated out from other property taxes. And there's some good ideas I've been hearing others talk about them as well. But I think this difference that we're talking about here largely has to do with two different philosophies of economics. You know, the supply side economics, which, and you know, most people are familiar with the Laffer curve and how that works. You know, and then of course, but it's not a perfect system. But the Keynesian economics, which is, you know, just spend money, spend your way out of a hole. You know, even deficit spending, I just think makes absolutely no sense. So it's almost like socialism versus capitalism. And you know, and I don't think capitalism is a perfect system. I think one of the problems that we have with capitalism that many people aren't mentioning is just the fact that you have to have a compassionate social capitalism that cares about people. If the only goal in capitalism is just the bottom line, then greed takes over, and companies get so big that they're as hard on the people as bad government. And so the biggest thing I think we have to do is begin teaching our young people, even in school, the importance of caring for your neighbor, being caring about community, putting patriotism back in our schools, having a cause that's bigger than just the bottom line. You know, you can't uncouple economics completely separate from these other issues. They all work together. And so the attitude that we teach people in schools and everything else is just absolutely essential that if we're going to have a successful economy.
Thank you. Eddie, I was thinking about asking you a different question here. Bring it up. If you're okay with it?
I'd love to.
Or do you want to answer this question?
Sure,
Okay. Okay. So on kind of going off of what he was saying right there, you know, we're talking about corporate taxes, right? Business taxes. Everyone knows, you know, you've started businesses. Everyone on this panel has led at some level their own organization business. Typically, we look at maybe starting it in Delaware, right? Or starting it in Wyoming. You know, we're looking at trying to get these tax incentives. And so, you know, what's it going to take to start things in Iowa and retain talent? And so you can take that angle on it, on the corporate end of things, but also this, what we call the brain drain. I'm sure as you guys have toured the state, you've heard that used over and over again, like with our small communities. How do we stop the brain drain? You know, why should I be building entrepreneurs of Iowa instead of maybe entrepreneurs of Illinois or entrepreneurs of Minnesota? How do we retain our young talent or our bright talent and that want to build serious companies here in Iowa?
Wow. Okay. So just to be clear, am
Yeah.
I answering both of these questions and
Yeah,
starting
yeah,
on this
yeah,
one?
yeah.
Okay. Just getting back to the, if
Yep.
I could start with the
Yep,
with the former
absolutely.
question about property taxes, in taxes in general.
Yep.
I would first say, just remind people where we were when, and I'm an issues-based person. I am a Republican, but I have to just qualify this as when the Republicans took over from the Democrats. It was, I think, the state budget on that year alone was facing a nearly $700 million deficit, and the budget was cut by 10%. I believe 700 teachers were laid off. The state really was in a mess. And it took a few years for the Republicans to get back control, stop the bleeding, so to speak, and get back to zero budgets, and then actually begin adding surpluses. And so just as a reminder, that's where we were. And now we've filled our rainy day fund. That's about $1 billion sitting in the bank, our rainy day fund. Then we, after
And
that,
for our users, watching, what's the rainy day fund?
so we have
Yeah.
two funds.
Okay.
So that is for surplus dollars. The rainy day fund is for, it's 10% of our budget, effectively. And we have to maintain that for emergencies. Now, the key difference between the rainy day fund and other funds is that has to be paid back, I believe, within a year. So that's a real sharp emergency that we have to use something. Now, once that's filled, we began what's called the Taxpayer Relief Fund. And that is roughly $4.5 billion right now. So we're right at about getting close to $6 billion in the bank. And so when we hear all these reports of, we're going to, go bankrupt tomorrow, we've managed well the state's resources. We've stewarded well, going from almost $700 million in the hole to $6 billion in the bank, in the positive. And so specifically though, on property taxes, I've been one of the leading voices, if not the leading voice, on property tax elimination, restructuring the entire system, and so that it's more equitable, so that we are not property taxing grandmothers out of their home that maybe they've owned for 20 years, but now they're on fixed incomes and they're struggling to pay that, what effectively feels like rent every year. And so, yes, we do need to change that. Back on your next question about people, about really resolving the brain drain.
Yes.
Okay. And some of this can be done through tax incentives. One of the, we're talking about entrepreneurs who start businesses. I can tell you that a lot of people, immediately once they get big, they hop on a plane to Texas or Tennessee and move their headquarters there. And part of that is because once, let me just get to a solution. One of the things that I was proposing was to, if a business, if a startup can remain in Iowa for 5 years, that capital gains, once they start selling that stock, I'm proposing that is income tax free after they've remained here in Iowa for 5 years.
So they stay here for 5 years,
yes.
and then you're giving them an incentive to continue to stay, because when they're looking for that exit in the future, there's a reduction in that capital
Yes,
gains.
absolutely, because as soon as they do, that's why the headquarters move. You mentioned Delaware or Texas or some of the other states. That allows them to stay here. Also getting rid of or expanding the sandbox that we have right now. We created a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox, typically for the fintech and ag sectors and insurance. And I'd like to expand that. And for those who don't know, it's almost the right to try for business. We want them to work on finding customers and not finding forms to fill out. And so you effectively get to start with very little regulation and then ask for permission effectively. And so we really want them to start. There's also another program that I've recommended called Start in 24. So if we can get you started, get your business plan out, 24 hours, incentivize that with $1,000 immediately off the back, that allows to use your genius sauce and stay here in Iowa.
Thank you. Thank you. Julie, we're going to go back to you. Same question. When we're talking about this brain drain with our small, especially small rural communities, I hear that all the time, whether I'm meeting with a banker, business advisors, that's really what they're all trying to work together. It doesn't matter what part of the political aisle you're on. We're all trying to save our small communities, which some of them are reducing their population count. Small business owners are closing on Main Street. COVID was really hard for them. So same question.
Well, brain drain isn't new in Iowa. It's basically been going on forever since any white people started to settle here, because what happens is we have such a farm-based economy, not as much now as it was originally, but still a farm-based, ag-based economy, that it is often that the kids who grow up here, and I can give you a fun story about that. When Bill Knapp was being interviewed, or interviewing a candidate that I was working for, he mentioned that he turned 17 and he joined the Navy in World War II. And his comment was, I don't ever want to see the underside of a cow again. He had worked on a dairy farm and he didn't want to come back to that. He did come back to Iowa, but he didn't come back to farm. And I think what happens is we really need to have options for the young people who are here on what they can do, and particularly those who are from the rural communities. And also, how can we facilitate them being able to work from the rural community? Because there are a lot of you, you're in a rural community, Elijah, at least that was where you were raised, in Osage. And that is, it's really important. And Osage is actually a pretty good example of a somewhat vibrant rural community. It's not, the streets aren't totally bare, although they've lost a lot of street storefront business of late. But there's one other thing I would like to just rebut. The funds that have been restored, let's talk about COVID money when we're talking about where the funds that have been restored has come from, and just kind of keep in mind that was federal government monies that were moved into some of those areas. All good that we have it, all good that they're there, but let's be honest about where it came from.
Can you clarify what specific thing you're talking about? So you're saying that there was some, so you're talking about that surplus we were talking about earlier. You're talking about that was Eddie was talking about?
It's about the surplus. So it was kind of two people asked, we're talking about that. Okay. And then also the rainy day fund, and then what somebody called another name, the lower taxes, taxpayer relief fund. Both of those, a lot of that money was COVID money coming into the state, and other monies coming into the state that got moved into those areas. So I think we just all have to be super honest and mindful of how those funds were filled, that they were refilled and filled, all good.
Eddie, you want to respond to that quickly?
Sure, I'd just like to
quickly,
clarify just a little bit. Well, the rainy day fund and the taxpayer relief fund started before COVID. This wasn't something that just, there's COVID, I guess we better start this. No, this is good management and good management structures and being good stewards of our funds here in the state. The other thing that I would like to add on to that is we did use a bit of the taxpayer relief fund as planned, and that's the thing that a lot of people forget when they talk about using a bit of that money. We actually planned for this. When trust me, I asked about a zillion questions when I got in the State House about 5.5 years ago, and we made sure that this was on point and that anything that we were eventually going to take out of that was planned in advance. And so this is not a surprise where we are. And I would take Hey, I would take a $6 billion in the black over 600, almost $700 million in the deficit.
Julie, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond here, and then I want to go to Adam, because Adam actually has another commitment. So I'm going to give him a few questions right off the bat so he can get off, if he's still on here.
Great. The only other response I had there was the rainy day fund actually goes back to Branstad 1, because that's where it was first implemented, because I was working in state government then when that happened. So it's not new since Terry Branstad became governor again. It is new, or Kim Reynolds, whichever you were referring to in terms of your timeline when you said the Republicans took over again. It goes way back. And I do also have to leave, but you've been asking me a lot of questions, so I might just pop off at 4.
Okay, thank you. Adam, are you still with us?
I am still here.
There you go.
I sort of spaced out there for a little bit, but I'm back. No,
yeah,
I'm kidding.
Awesome. Yeah, so same thing, same question. You really, your vision on specifically that. How do we combat the brain drain? You were probably a younger entrepreneur when you were getting those things off the ground. What do we do about it? Yep.
Yeah, two quick things along that line. So I went to school at Minnesota State Mankato. So I left Iowa. I was drafted by the Philadelphia Phillies in 2002. So I went from Iowa to Minnesota, from Minnesota to Florida. From Florida, I got moved up to New York. Then I got moved back to Florida, which is the wrong direction when you're trying to make it into the big leagues. So I'm actually somebody who left Iowa and came back. So I believe there's one path that we need to look at called it's okay to leave Iowa, gain some experience, gain some understanding, knowledge, relationships, get some worldview experience, and then come back. In order to do that, though, we need a state that is conducive for young families. We need to make marriage popular again. We need to make families popular again. We need to invest in our natural resources. We've got a wonderful natural resource here in the state of Iowa. And when I moved back to Iowa after living in Florida and New York and Minnesota, I realized that Iowa was home. And I moved back in roughly 2004. Best move I ever made, because Iowa is a place where I can go out and I can fish, I can hunt, I can raise my family. I've got 2 boys, 10 and 8. We've got a little acreage. You're out in the woods all the time. So Iowa is an incredible place to raise a family, and we need to be promoting that and looking for those that have left Iowa to bring them back. Because again, that's what I did. And I think my experience that I gained from leaving has been a tremendous benefit here in the state. Now, there's another side of it called how do we keep people here without them leaving? And that sounds kind of strange to say keep them here, but we need to create an environment that is conducive for business ownership as well. And right now, I am actively promoting the skilled trades industry like you have never seen. Right now, I'm not anti-AI, I'm not anti-technology, but what I am for are businesses that AI can't replace, and then capitalizing on opportunity within manufacturing across the state so that people, young kids can get jobs, and hopefully they can get those jobs either out of high school or out of a community college so they don't have crushing student loan debt. And so I am on one end an active promoter of letting kids leave, letting youth leave, but making sure that they know they can come back and they will have a state that is custom fit for them to raise a family. But then also the kids that don't want to leave and they want to start the American dream. That is possible here in the state of Iowa by jumping into the trades industry, by looking at vocational studies, vocational arts, industrial arts, back into schools, getting involved in community colleges, and then getting a job where you're working with your hands, you're working with your mind, you're solving problems. Because right now, there's a tremendous need for electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, mechanics, and those trades are cool. And we need to be promoting that and letting people know that. And the amount of people I've talked to that have been in those industries that have not just created their own jobs, but have invented products from those jobs would blow your mind, because they're solving problems on a regular basis, and they're doing things that Iowans do. They solve problems, they get up early, they go to bed late, That's who we are as Iowans. And as governor, I will be the biggest promoter of that culture that this state has ever seen, because that's who we are as Iowans. And once young people understand that, they're going to realize that Iowa is the place to be, and Iowa is the place to live and to thrive.
Adam, do you have time for one last question before you hop off here?
I could do one more question
Okay.
if you're good with that.
Okay, yep. One last question is a question I'm going to ask you guys at the end. What makes you the best fit to be, like we talked about earlier, the CEO of the state of Iowa, the head of the state? Why you?
Yeah. So 3 things. As CEO, you have to be able to operate the state. The last 5 years, I have been operating the entire state of Iowa in the governor's cabinet, running administrative services. So the CEO has to know how to operate. I can operate on day one. The CEO also has to understand and be a champion for culture. And I discussed that a little bit with my previous answer. I've got my finger on the pulse of culture across the state of Iowa. I'll promote the trades. I've been in the depths and the pits of misery as an entrepreneur, and I've been on the high tops of the mountains as an entrepreneur. I understand culture. I understand Iowans. And the third thing is the CEO, the governor of Iowa, has to understand how to work with the legislature and create policy that is conducive to the culture of Iowa, that's conducive to the operations of Iowa. And I have done that as well. So I'm custom fit for this role and excited to continue this race, excited to continue to have these conversations. So thank you, Elijah. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Julie, are you still with us? I think she might have. Oh,
I'm here. I was on mute.
All right. I'll ask you that same last question as well. I know you have to hop off in a second here.
Yeah.
And then we'll just be live with you two. Julie,
Okay.
why are you the best fit to be CEO of the state of Iowa? Why you?
So I have to give a little background. I've been out touring the state, actually by the community college districts, in order to get a feel for the whole state and not just particular counties in the state, and have been doing what I call interview sessions, because I talk about I've applied for the job of governor and I'm here for my interview, and talking with people, and they're open-ended questions. What has come back that is really profound from my perspective has been the consensus among Iowans about what needs to be worked on in the state. And ironically, it's clean water, public schools funded, and the healthcare. And then there's complexities under healthcare, but basically we have parts of the state where women can't get OBGYN care at all. Last year, 34 different services closed for OBGYNs around the state, which leaves whole big chunks of the state where if a woman is pregnant, she can't deliver. She has to go a long way away to deliver. Also, any of the other healthcare issues related. But I've been a problem solver through my work. I joke that it's been since I was a child, but I've been a problem solver for my work through my work over the years. And I have also, and Iowa has a lot of problems that do need to be solved. Some of them we talked about with taxation. Some of them are the things that you're referencing, Elijah, regarding the need for business entrepreneurs to have access to the services. I really liked Adam's comment about the workers, the tech workers, the people with electrical and all that. We definitely need more of that in the state. And so I think there's a lot of problems that need to be solved and addressed. And I have so much experience doing that with large companies and other organizations, nonprofits and for-profits. And I would love to put that experience to work for Iowans. And thank you very much for the invitation here. I do really appreciate it. And hope to meet all of the people who are there at some point in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you both. So back to you guys, right? I wanted to touch on, this is a great question that I had prepared, but I wanted to touch specifically on this shortage, right? So everywhere you go in the state, I'm sure you guys get this a lot, we have a housing shortage in a lot of our rural communities. There's not enough housing, there's not enough child care services. And what Julie was touching on really ties into this next question was we have that whole side of these social needs, right? Access to hospitals, access to clean water, fast, reliable internet. But on the other side, we also have what we were talking about earlier on the business with business taxes, employment. What do you think are some of those key focuses that your administration would really key in on? You know, Adam was talking about marriages. He was talking about bringing these young families in. What would your administration specifically look at as a way to foster entrepreneurial growth? Is it on the social issues end? Is it more of the regulations?
You're looking at me, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I really like the idea of skilled trades as well.
Yep.
You know, this is absolutely important. I learned to weld when I was probably 6 years old. My dad taught me how to weld. But in our high school, when I grew up, we had shop class. Kids were welding. We were learning how to build things out of wood. You know, one of the things I enjoyed doing growing up was working with lathes and machining equipment and milling machines. You know, and I mean, part of what I do as a hobby is I'm a hobby gunsmith. I build custom hunting revolvers. And so, you know, you build your own cylinders and rebarrel these things, and you know, and so there's so many problems that you have to solve when you do that. You know, I mean, I use trigonometry and, you know, algebra to figure out some of the, you know, the parameters of building these cylinders and different things. You know, so but there's nothing more satisfying, absolutely nothing more satisfying than to work hard all day or have a project and see it to completion and then hold it in your hand and say, I did this. You know, and if kids can start learning that early, even in high school, and build something, you know, it's like building a little stool. I've got a stool at home that I built in shop class when I was in junior high school. You know, and it's still there. You know, you remember those things. You know, I've got an old dustpan that we built, a metal dustpan that we soldered together and learned how to solder, you know, in shop class. You know, so these things are just absolutely essential. And you know, when we get to the social side of things, you know, there's a lot of talk these days about mental illness, and it's a multifaceted problem, and there's no one answer to it. But one thing that could help is just the idea of that sense of accomplishment and feeling the sense of purpose and feeling like I can accomplish something myself. You know, we've got so many things going on in our culture now where there's just no sense of purpose and direction. And then, of course, so that's real important. I think another big thing for making our state accessible to entrepreneurs is decentralization. I think decentralization is a key principle that I like to apply to just about everything. Now, there may be a few times when you have to centralize, but I always look for how to decentralize things. Because when we decentralize business and all kinds of different things, it opens up more opportunities for startups. If we have companies that get so big and controlling that they essentially become monopolies, then that really cuts down the opportunities for startups. Now, who can compete with that? And so there's an interesting dynamic to that when we think about decentralizing and doing that sort of thing. So those are just important issues that I think are important. And you know, so keeping the workforce here in Iowa. You know, I've been talking about this from day one of my campaign, even before I was even going to run. But you know, one of the things that has bothered me for years is that we work all of our life and we pay most of our life and pay off our mortgage, and then we have to rent our house from the government. So I think, you know, one of the things I've been looking at, and I'm hearing others talk about it as well now, and that is that, you know, if you're a senior and you've lived in Iowa for 10 years, why not having your primary residence be property tax free? You know, I think we can manage that somehow as a state. There's different options for doing that, small sales tax, whatever. But the program might actually pay for itself because, first off, if people know they get their property tax for their primary residence is going to be tax-free, then they will stay here when they retire instead of moving to another state. And then their families might stay here as well. So it fosters this idea of staying in Iowa, growing in Iowa, that this is a friendly place to stay. So those are just some important issues that I think we could do to help build our growth here. And more on the social issue as well is that, you know, when it comes to the whole family issue and encouraging families again, you know, we had this tragic, it's just, tragic's not even a strong enough word, but the assassination of Charlie Kirk. You know, and his impact now is being multiplied like never before. But one of the things he was talking about was get married, have children. Because, you know, that's how we populate the earth. You know, 2 children per family doesn't even keep up with maintaining the population. And so, somehow there's been this idea that it's not a good thing to have children. We need to have children. I've got 4 children, 13 grandchildren. And, sometimes I wonder if I should have had more, but this is important. And plus we've had a culture that we've killed 70 million babies through abortion, in our country. And then we wonder why we have a work shortage. That has to play into it. So there's a shortage of workers. And so these are some social issues. All these things play together. And again, I just want to make this statement, and maybe you've got some follow-up questions with this, because I know I'm digressing here. But all these things work together. You can't decouple entrepreneurship, economy, tech. All these things work together with all the social issues, faith, family, community, patriotism. These things all build strong, cohesive families, cohesive communities. And when people live in those things, and then let me just say one more thing. We get back to the whole decentralization thing. The idea of restoring the family farm is absolutely essential. Iowa, this is what Iowa is. Iowa is agriculture. And so there's an old saying that, somebody said one time, it says, dance with the one that brung you, So, agriculture is who we are. It's what got us, and so we need to start growing the food that we actually eat in Iowa instead of importing it, make sure it's good, healthy, nutritious food. We need to make Iowa the kind of state where we are as self-sustaining as possible. And when we do that, then we're secure. Decentralization secures everything. So I've got some ideas that I'm developing. I'll just put it that way. They're developing in terms of restoring the family farm, making it more able for more young people who want to farm to get into a smaller acreage and actually make a living on a smaller acreage instead of having to start off and have a 5,000 acre farm to make a living.
Well,
go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, Eddie, let's go to you. Same question there. I mean, looking at your administration when you're in office, you're looking at, okay, there's all these issues that you're going to be working on, you'd be addressing. Where's your administration's focus? Specifically as it relates to entrepreneurship, what key initiatives are you going to be looking to drive and policies?
Okay, well, there are a number.
Yeah.
I literally have 17 specifically on entrepreneurs, but one of them includes a Buy Iowa First program for all the bids, all the state bids, whether it's a university bid, for Iowa companies, giving them a 5-point bump on any assessment. So that way, Iowans reap the benefits of Iowa funds. I'm also have been developing what I call a red zone, rural economic development. Think of it as a cross between economic development, but also opportunity zones. Right now we have a lot of economic development activity, just never seems to leave 4 or 5 counties, right? And so we need to make sure that there's real rural economic attention and development in our rural areas where, some communities, they have nothing but an elevator, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have something to keep young families there. Also talked about, I proposed a tax credit for your 3rd child, right? Making sure that we keep families together and continuing producing kids, right? And incentivizing them. And you know what? This actually works. We talked about how tax incentives drive behavior. I can tell you that 3 people in my current legislative district of Johnston, Urbandale, Ankeny, Saylorville, in that area, I've had 3 people who've told me specifically that when we eliminated income tax on their retirement income, that gave them the incentive to move back to Iowa. They were 3 of these people were military people, and they were looking at the usual suspects, right? Tennessee and Florida and Texas, which have no income tax, right? And once they found out that their military income as they retire is also retirement income, they decided to move back to Iowa for that very reason. And so I do understand that property taxes and incentives work. We've also done, again, for entrepreneurs and businesses, after probably decades, long before I thought about getting in politics, right? There was the battle of the inheritance tax, right? And we finally were able to get rid of that. But there's a little bit that's left, and that's for family businesses. And so I'd like to completely move that around and make that it's...
Specific thoughts on that? Move it around, maybe?
Well, right now, if you transfer that business
Yep.
and it's still operating in the family business, that we waive that.
Yep.
But it still is there if you decide not to, or to sell it or something like that. So we want to, again, get rid of those to give them more funds to just hang around Iowa. And so the other thing that I like to point out, because it was mentioned by people who are no longer on the call here, the trades. And we've actually already been, it's almost like they didn't realize that we've been working on this issue for the last 5 years, and very much strengthening our apprenticeship programs, fast tracking, going directly from high school into the trades. For instance, there's one group called ABC trainings or constructions, ABC something, in our community. And to the point that was already made up, they take these high school kids who aren't on a college track and immediately start training them over 4 years. They're being paid while they're being trained. You're talking about construction, plumbing, electrical, welding, all of those things. And they're now integrated into our schools. Obviously, every district is different, but that is something that we have a model that is already working. We've been spending time developing that, and it's working extremely well. Even teachers and paras, we have high school students in our schools right now who are assisting teaching and going to a teacher classes while they're still students. It's absolutely amazing. And so we want to continue that and even expand it even more so. So I don't want you to think that this hasn't been going on. I've been spending a lot of attention making sure that this has already started and is flourishing right now.
Thank you. Back to Brad. A lot of times when voters are looking at the candidate that they're going to champion for, that they're going to go to the ballot box for, yes, they're hiring that person, but they're also hiring the people that come with them, right? You're going to be running that administration. You're going to be building a team around you. What makes you fit to build the team, and what type of team would you be building? You're the CEO of that administration. Who are you going to be surrounding yourself with? What type of values do they have? What type of competency?
Yeah, that's a good question, and actually, I'm already starting to work and build some teams for some specific areas. I think, and one of those teams is around education. I think education is absolutely critical. George Mason, who's the father of the Bill of Rights, he said, if free people do not examine their liberties and how they were obtained, they risk losing these rights. And so our educational systems, though, aren't teaching the reality of how we achieved the freedoms and how America became the successful nation that it is. Actually, it's almost like we got so many problems and people think about it. But, and my paraphrase of George Mason's statement there is this, and that is that if we don't understand how government works, then we won't know when it's not working. And so that's a really important concept. We have to restore education back to the founding principles that this nation was founded on, or at least include them. And so many times they're gone. They're just not there. The slogan for our campaign is restoring the foundations of freedom. Now, that's not just a slogan we came up with. We thought maybe this would sound cool for a campaign. I started doing worldview seminars and traveling all over the state of Iowa and other states around the Midwest, doing worldview seminars on how these principles and where they came from that our nation was founded on. And, I don't consider myself a constitutional scholar or expert, but I can read. I know what it says. And so these are principles that, I've been doing this for a long, long time. And so these are principles that are ingrained in me for like 4 decades. And so this is important. So I'm going to look for people that understand these principles, because these things are ingrained in me, and that's how I think. I reason from these basics. I mean, it's not something I just memorized last week. These are ingrained in me, so I think from these principles. And so I know those are the kind of people I'm going to look for to surround myself with to understand these foundational principles. And so, like I mentioned, education, already talking to some people that think like I think, and, we need to get the right kind of principles back in our schools, common sense principles. Like one, for instance, we're talking about, apprenticeships and things like that. Well, there was a move, and when I was in the legislature, we actually passed a bill and made it okay for people to teach with less qualifications. But part of it was that it removed the praxis test. It's kind of like the qualifying test for being a teacher. And it's like, that just seems backwards to me. It's like, if you can, it's like if you can pass that test and prove that you know the material and you can teach, then you can teach it. And skip the other part. If you can show you can do it, then why do you need all these other qualifications that half the time don't even apply to what you're going to be doing? So prove that you can do it, and then we can open up a job for people without as much training or qualifications. Not to say that they shouldn't get that, but that's when the apprentice can actually begin to function more properly, when they can prove that they can do the work. So that's true in just about every trade. So those are just a few principles I'm thinking about. And that's the kind of people I want to surround myself with.
Yeah, thank you. Eddie, what about you? What are you looking for in your team, your staff, the people that you're surrounding yourself with?
Well, I got to tell you, I've got the best team in America. And, I have the distinction of being the only Republican who wins in the blue district. And you don't do that by accident. You do that by promoting your values, promoting your principles, and looking and working with people who sometimes disagree strongly, vehemently with a few of those, and understanding that we still have to work together. We're going to work together for the next 2 years. So let's get together and find out what we can agree on, what we can work on. I cannot tell you how shocked a lot of people are who aren't in our district that I win in that district when Joe Biden won our district, Kamala Harris won our district. In 22, I don't think any Republican won. I don't think Governor Reynolds won our district. I don't think Senator Grassley won our district. But the point is, when people look at me, they understand that I'm a leader, that I'm going to listen to every single person, disagree or not, and then find the things that we can work on. If you think about what goes on at the Capitol, both as a legislator and as a chief executive, probably the average Iowan would be shocked to understand that 85% of those things or those bills are actually bipartisan. Actually, over 85% are bipartisan, because you need someone who actually listens to everyone, and you're not going to find anybody who out-listens, out-works, and out-hears all Iowans. I mentioned earlier that my colleagues refer to me as the hardest working guy in the House. That's not something that they just say. They see that passion, and when you're that way, you attract people who also want to help people, who have a passion, have a heart for people. I can tell you that why I even got in politics, I had zero interest in jumping into the fishbowl, so to speak. But I jumped in to solve a problem. We had a son that we adopted, and he came, he's a great kid, knucklehead kid, macho guy, but he did have some mental health challenges. And then when we lost him 6 years ago, I remembered all the holes that we'd seen in our mental health care system. And so I'm a put up or shut up kind of guy. And so I said, well, let's either stop talking about the issues or get in there and jump in and fix problems. And so since then, I've understood that some people get involved in politics to be something or to use that as a stepping stone or as a point of arrival, and other people get involved in politics to do something. And once people understand, I have no interest in office just to be in office. I have an interest in defending your rights, helping people, reaching out, finding solutions as an entrepreneurial problem solver, as a ministerial problem solver, as a community problem solver, you attract those people. And last thing I want to say on that is I started a group called Mentoromics, where initially we teach them how to code. We take at-risk kids, teach them, they could either be makers or coders or whatever, programmers. But that's the nominal thing. What we're really teaching these kids who are at-risk kids is discipline and goals and structure. And it has the effect of taking these kids from D's and F's to C's and B's, and gives them a lot of purpose. And Des Moines Public Schools has asked us a couple of times, how do you do that? And it's like, because you're not teaching them coding, we're teaching them structure and life skills. And so this has always been a passion of mine, finding solutions, finding ways to help, and that's since gone into education, entrepreneurship, mental health, assisting our autism bills. I had one of the best autism bills in the nation this past session. And as governor, I continue to expand that team of problem solvers and solution providers.
What does Iowa look like with you at the helm? A lot of times in business, we always start something with the end in mind, right? When we're working with a young entrepreneur just getting off the ground, it's what's the exit strategy, right? It's like, well, I'm just starting, that's 20 years from now, but you should start thinking about it. How much equity you're giving away, you're raising capital, but the governorship, it's going to be a limited amount of time no matter what. But what does Iowa look like if you were in office and you're about to leave? What does Iowa look like?
Oh, wow, I love that question. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, I'm guessing you're asking that, or just in general?
Both, but general, yeah.
So I'm not even sure if you understood, you knew you did this, but one of the questions you referenced Delaware, or you referenced another state. Iowa needs to be the first state that you think of when you start talking about businesses. We're a long way from there now. We need to be the first state that you think about when you talk about health. Make Iowa healthy again, to borrow that phrase. And we need to, it's not just an agriculture state, right? We hear the commercials, does corn grow Iowa, or does Iowa grow corn, right? It's really, we have to use those resources, but we have to expand. 100% we need to expand, diversify. We all, well, maybe some of you don't remember the farm crisis of the 80s and the 90s, right? That's because we hadn't fully diversified. And we need to, I mentioned rural economic development zones. We need to expand our rural Iowa. We need to make sure that there are hotspots and internet available, as well as real activity. Same with our hospitals. We're losing too many care facilities in rural parts of Iowa. We need to make sure that this is a family-friendly state, that this is a business-friendly state, that is an entrepreneurial state, and one thing that is, I can't believe I've gone this far without mentioning this, but education. We need to get Iowa education back to number one. That is literally the topic that I talk about the most outside of mental health. When I was a kid, Iowa led the nation in education. We weren't just near the top, we led the nation. Not just 1 year, not just 2 years, but for decades. And we abandoned the Iowa model that was working, and we went to the national models, and you've heard them all, No Child Left Behind, Common Core, ESSA, all of those things, and then abandoned really what was working. We abandoned phonics, we abandoned the discipline, we abandoned a lot of the characteristics of Iowa education, and we went from being number one every year, or number 3 in a bad year, to now number 23, I believe was the last.
Number 23 is where we're at, yeah.
And no one's talking about that. And it's an easy problem to solve. It just requires a lot of focus from the top. If you look at what Mississippi did, went from 49th to 9th in like 5 or 6 years by implementing effectively the Iowa model that we abandoned. And so we have to restore that. That's what Iowa will look like. Iowa will be, we will be property tax free, reorganized. If not income tax free, we will certainly continue to have a low flat rate income tax. It will be flourishing. Businesses will be moving to Iowa as a destination spot, not as a periodic 4 year.
Not a flyover state anymore, right?
No flyover states, and no just campaign, presidential campaigns every 4 years state, right?
That's right.
This will be the destination spot in the Midwest.
Brad, back to you. Similar question, actually the same question. With you at the helm, what does Iowa look like? You know, when you've exited as governor of the state, what does Iowa look like? How does the state look? You know, what's changed? What transformation's taken place?
Well, I believe very strongly in the idea of government of the people, for the people, by the people. And so I see an Iowa that is not controlled by a few big donor class of people who call the shots for people who are in public office. Now, I know we have some good folks, you know, when I was in the legislature, good folks like Eddie and some others who don't give in to that sort of thing. And so, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of money change hands, big donations given, and the result of that is sometimes at least from where I sit, it looks like it changes the definition of right and wrong. So the Iowa that I will lead will be an Iowa that is run by regular people, down to earth, common sense people who think problems through and fix them in a common sense way, and it's not based on, well, I have to owe someone a favor. You know, that's one of the biggest problems. I made that comment in the introduction about, you know, draining swampy land, you know, so I literally have swamp draining experience. Well, there's a political application to that. And I've seen that sort of thing go on in our government, and that has to end. There is a shift happening in our culture right now. People are fed up with that, and that has to end. This whole the big boss. Because when I chose to run for governor, first off, I never thought I would even run for public office. I thought my job was to inform people. That's why I wrote this little book called The Freedom Quiz. You know, it's just something to help encourage people and educate them on some of the principles of America. But I never thought I would run for public office. And so the more I worked, people kept saying, well, you should run. And I thought, nah, it's not for me. And then one day the Lord just made it clear that I was supposed to run, and now running for this. You know, so this is not some ambition I had. This is just, I feel like it's just a calling, and I've got to do it to be obedient. And so here we go, but it's regular common sense people. There's a shift happening. People, as I said, people are tired of the donor class that call the shots, and it's time for the people to call the shots. Now, to do that is not an overnight switch. Nothing happens instantly. I wish you could get elected and just flip a switch and fix everything the next day. That doesn't work that way in government. But that's why education is such a huge issue, to put the founding principles of America back into our educational system. I totally agree with a lot of things Eddie was talking about there, about getting these things back into, getting the right kind of curriculum back into our schools. Common sense stuff. You know, that's the Iowa that I want to lead. And when we do that, we're going to see a lot of good things happen. There's no end to the number of issues you could go into the weeds on and talk about the things you want to fix. And there's a lot of those. But I think we start with just getting rid of people. I'll give you one example, and I guess I'll end with that one. But, you know, we have a big issue going on in our state right now with eminent domain. The abuse of eminent domain, using eminent domain for private gain. For a private company wants to use eminent domain to take people's land, and this private company is not a common carrier, and it's for a product that's not a public utility. So it's very clear that we should not be using eminent domain for that. But because some big power players have influenced certain people in politics, at least from where I sit, that's how it looks. Yet they're pushing this through. And so we got a big fight going on because of that. So this is one of those issues. And then the premise of the whole thing is based on the fact that CO2 is polluting our atmosphere, and we need to bury it under the ground somewhere in North Dakota. Well, I had a scientist, one of the top scientists from one of our state universities, tell me in hushed tones, he leaned forward real carefully and looked around, and then he said, you know, listen, I don't think there's anything humans can do to produce enough CO2 that's going to hurt our atmosphere. He said, but I can't say that or I would lose my job. You see, this is the kind of culture we've developed, and that kind of culture has to end. We have to end we have to be honest, we have to speak the truth, we have to be free to speak the truth without the fear of losing our job. And if we're wrong, we can get proven wrong. But if we're right, we can make changes. But right now, we are so restricted with this whole cancel culture business based on false premise like that, and at least in my opinion. And so those are the kind of things, that's the kind of Iowa I want to lead.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Sherman started. Oh, yeah. You want to jump?
Can I expand on that?
Yes, please do.
He
Please
mentioned
do.
my name, and I'm fully in agreement, not disagreement.
Oh, yeah,
Just to
he
be
did.
clear.
He did.
That
Absolutely.
was
Yep.
well stated. Very well stated. The only thing I would like to add on that, I can't add to anything, but just to point out the first point you were making about what I call campaign finance reform. That's one of the things. I got to tell you, I started this fight, was it 3 years ago? I think I've not passed, that would be a solution, but we started working on campaign finance reform. And for the first time in history, to my knowledge, certainly the first time that I've been at the state capitol, the contribution limits, that bill was not just killed. They took the subcommittee away, so that it was not even going to have a discussion. It wasn't we're going to have a discussion and then kill the bill. Like, no, this bill is not even going to see the light of day, even after we had been assigned a committee. And so it is clear that there are certain people who do not want the status quo to change. And I look at it like this. I mean, imagine George Washington. You have the founding fathers sitting around discussing who is going to lead this new nation that we're founding. And somebody says, well, I like that George Washington over there. I think he's the guy. And then you look at somebody else. Well, this guy's got more money and he can do more for us, right? That they would be rolling over in their graves right now if they understood that this is off of the system that we have, instead of let's go through everyone and pick the best. And so I agree 100% with what you're saying there.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm gonna leave you guys with one last question. It's the same question we asked the other two before they got off. We only get one vote, right? Everyone watching, the entrepreneurs, that you're speaking to, these small business owners and founders, CEOs and executives, when they're making that choice, why you? And we'll start with Sherman and allow you to end. And why should they pick you? There's a lot of people in this race, a lot of other entrepreneurs and founders and executives who have a lot of experience as well. Why do you deserve their vote? And we'll start with you.
Well, I think my grassroots experience, not just with dealing with people as a pastor for 45 years, where you do their weddings, you dedicate their babies, you counsel them through tough times, you do their weddings, and sometimes have to bury their loved ones. And these are people from all walks of life. And then you counsel them, even in their business issues. You try to find the scriptural principles that are going to make them successful. So 45 years of grassroots experience, and not only that, but also in the party, understanding how government was supposed to work. I made that comment earlier about how if you don't know how government's supposed to work, you won't know when it's not working. That's something that I've been involved in for, like I said, for 4 decades. I think the grassroots experience all the way from, I've been a caucus leader, been a county chair, I've been to all the conventions to the national level. So, you got to work with the political system. And if you're ever going to reform it, you got to understand how it's working and work. And so I've been very deeply involved for many years in the grassroots level. And then there's just the broad range of experience that I mentioned. I think that's a key factor. I think I bring that to the table. I think more, possibly more than the others. I don't want to make claims I can't back up, but I got a lot of years of that kind of experience, practical blue collar stuff, along with the legislative and political experience. And then there's the issue of just being somebody that believes government should get out of the way. I think that's an important issue. And then there's the issue of just being willing to challenge the status quo. I think I'm the only guy in this race who can prove that, because I jumped in, that I am willing to challenge the status quo, because I got in this race first, and I was in before Governor Reynolds said she wasn't going to run. And so I challenged the status quo, and And so that's proof of that. Everybody else got in after she decided she wasn't going to run. And so I think that's a pretty good indicator that I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo, and that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to think outside the box and challenge the status quo. And so that's what I bring to the table. That's why I'm going to be the next governor of Iowa.
Thank you. And thank you for attending tonight with us, Eddie.
Thank you, Elijah, and the rest of the team that's here. By the way, it's a great looking team, great setup here that you have here.
Yeah, thank you.
So before I continue my answer, I do have to disagree slightly with my colleague here. I think if you look at my tenure in the legislature, literally, it is literally the definition of challenging the status quo. Many people, if you understand how funding works, and sometimes it always gets back to funding, right? Think of this. I am a Republican currently serving in not one of, but the worst districts for, if you look at a party basis, for an incumbent to win. Not one of the most difficult ones, but the most difficult, right? And I won there 3 times. Not by being quiet, but actually by being open and saying, this is what I believe, these are my non-negotiables, let's talk about everything else, right? And when you think about that, and I'm just gonna throw some numbers in here, sorry for doing this to your audience, but I really want to get the gravity of this. When you're in that situation and your party leadership says, I'm going to give your neighbor $500,000 to run their campaign, your other neighbor $500,000 to run their campaign, the other neighbor $500,000 to run their campaign, the other neighbor, all in the metro area, whether it's the Grime seats, the Ankeny seats, all that. But for you, Eddie, you've challenged the system too much. We're going to give you $0.00. That goes along. They were sending a message that yes, Eddie, you're effective, but you're doing too much. You're challenging the system too much. And so I don't want there to be a hint that I'm not challenging the system. That literally is my entirety. I think if you had an XY graph and you had effective legislator and most misunderstood and challenged by leadership, I think I would be the clear winner right in the middle. That is just, but while being challenged, being extremely effective. I can say that I've passed more bills than all 5 of the candidates combined. When you talk about actually getting things done. And I want to take that same enthusiasm, same hard work, get Iowa education back to #1 where it needs to be. I've already made some progress on that. We passed the teacher empowerment bill. We passed that the teachers requested, by the way. Really take a better look at our mental health care system. We passed 22 different bills just on mental health. That has taken us from the bottom. We're still not good yet. We still have a lot of opportunity there. But I think as governor, definitely I can make a better impact. Number 3, as Representative Sherman said, eminent domain abuse has to stop. Number 4, property tax reform / abolishment replacement has to happen in Iowa. We really have been tinkering around the edges. I've been listening to supervisors. I've been listening to just regular citizens. I've been listening to city managers, and really trying to get an idea of how we can really do this. It's hard work, otherwise it would have already been done. But I've been leading on this issue for the last 1.5 years, and or I should say, speaking more loudly over the last 1.5 years. And number 5, I mean, we need voter integrity laws. We need to make sure that we have campaign refinance laws that are enacted. that really get back to the people. I mean, to be honest, we're running an experiment right now. Can the grassroots win or can money win? And that's, I think the people with the money are not here. And so we're out fighting, and I think as governor, I will absolutely make sure that everyone is heard, everyone is listened to, and every need is addressed.
Well, thank you. I want to thank both of them for driving out and coming to our in-person studio. It's been a long 12 hours of fantastic content. We've had CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs from early stage all the way to exited, ending with the great governor candidates. Thank you guys for taking the drive out here and answering our questions. Really, really appreciate it.
It's an honor.
Yeah, with that, we'll end our live. Thank you all listening at home. Have a good night.